I'm 34 and male and have an adopted daughter, Holly, who I love completely. I also have a girlfriend, Jane, who I've been with for 2 years and I'm hoping to marry her. I met her through work, and we both work for my dad Harry's company. I worked with Jane on some projects and we bonded. We started to date and I was very clear from the get-go. I had a daughter and Holly had to be considered in any relationship that we had. Jane told me it's fine, and so I decided to move to a serious relationship with Jane, and we became official. I'm wondering about a few things that have been bothering me, which might be nothing, but I guess it's so good to get opinions on things. Anyways, I should probably give you a background on my info. It's hard to give advice on something that you don't know the backstory of, so here we go. I grew up in a small town. It's built around the businesses which we're known for, and her dad is a big player. It's made him pretty wealthy, and I always knew that I would work with him after university, where I chose to specialize in the same field. When I was growing up, I became friends with Paul, who lived next door to me. His dad worked in the same field, but Paul did not have an easy life. His parents would fight all the time, and he was neglected quite a lot. My parents felt sorry for Paul, and he spent a lot of time at our house, which was great as we were best friends. Paul's parents split up and his mother left, and no one knew where she went. 2 years after that, Paul's father passed away in a work-related accident, and so he moved in to live with us, as he had no other family. I always considered him my brother, and he also went into the same field as my dad and worked in the company with me. When he met Jessica and fell in love, I was so happy for them. I was the best man at their wedding, and when they had their daughter Holly, I was asked to be her godparent. I planned on being a great uncle to Holly, but life had other plans. When Holly was 2 years of age, Paul and Jessica were killed in a road traffic accident. They were coming home from an evening out when a drunk driver slammed into their car. Paul and Jessica were killed instantly, and Holly was injured, and I spent weeks sitting next to her hospital bed while she recovered and mourning my best friends, as they had no family. Paul and Jessica had specified in their will that I would raise Holly if anything happened to them, and once Holly was released from the hospital, I took on the role to be her father. It was hard, but I loved her so much, and as time went on, I'm so proud to be her dad. Holly is full aware that I'm not her real dad, and I have lots of photos around the house, especially in her room, of her parents, and I tell her stories all the time about the things that we used to do. It breaks my heart that I have so many happy memories of Paul and Jessica, but Holly has none of her own. We have had times when Holly has cried and begged for her parents to come back, and those times were hard. My parents love Holly as a grandchild, and Holly loves to spend time with my mom. They spend hours in the garden and baking together, and life has been good, and when I met Jane, I thought I had gained the one thing I was missing: a loving partner. When Jane and Holly first met, I kept it short visits and mostly days out. We should go out for lunch and go on a trip to allow them to get to know each other. Holly was standoffish at first, as she was used to having me to herself, and I understood that. She had just lost so much in her life. She was scared to let herself get close to people in times in case that they left her as well. Jane admitted from the start that she did not have a lot of experience with children, but I told her to just relax and act normal and everything would be fine. Over time, Jane spent more time with us, and we began to have her stay over for one night at first and then on the weekends. Finally, about a year ago, I asked Jane if she would like to move in with Holly and me. I did sense a reluctance at first, but it's a big thing for anybody to go from living on their own to suddenly living with 2 other people. One whom was a child. Holly was weary again, but she seemed to be okay with it and things settled down. There were some teething problems, but that was expected. Holly was not used to having anyone else in the house, and we had routines that had been in place her whole life. Suddenly, she was having to share her time with me with another person, and I admit that there were times when Holly was very temperamental and sulky. I tried always to have one-on-one times with Holly, as it was important for me to do that so she did not think that she was being pushed to the side by Jane. On the same theme, I made sure that Jane and I always had date nights as well, as I would use that time to do things with Jane as a couple. Things really started to fall into place. There is still up and downs, but it would be unrealistic to think that any family, was just perfect in any way. My parents were the best parents in the world, but there were times when we clashed heads, and I knew that they did disagree on things. It's human nature to not always agree with others. I just wanted to make it clear that I was not trying to put across a perfect life. It was a good life, and we were happy. Time has passed, and Holly's now 10 years old. She'll be 11 years old in 2 weeks. She's developing her own opinions and her own sense of what she wants to do in life, and it's fascinating. She loves school, especially English and music, and she has a piano and violin lessons. Paul was a musician, and it seems it was genetic, as Holly's going to be a talented musician if she carries on this route. I personally have no musical talents myself, but I do love literature. And Holly and I share that, and I've read to her since she first came to live with me, and we still read the same books and discuss them. Jane is into reading books too. She prefers to watch TV, and her music tastes are very different than ours, but each their own. It has caused a couple of disagreements in the house about what to listen to in the car, but nothing serious. So, I'm kind of drifting around the issue that I came here to talk about with you. It's for 2 reasons. Firstly, I'm most likely worrying over nothing, and so I'm going to look like an idiot. I'm fully expecting somebody with more experience in parenting to tell me that this is just what it's like raising a girl and that I need to get a grip. However, I'm also worried that I might lay my worries out there and somebody will tell me that I'm not seeing things that are not there, and then we would have an issue that I need to deal with. I never thought I would sincerely hope that someone would tell me I was an idiot, but I don't want there to be an issue, as I have plans and I want to carry them out, though. Right, I'll stop beating around the bush and get to the point. A couple of months ago, I came home from work and found that this was weird silence over the household. Jane was in the living room watching one of the junk television shows that she seems to enjoy, and Holly was shut up in her bedroom reading. In itself, it was not unusual, as Holly likes to have peace and quiet when she reads. But there was a sense of tension that was not usually there. I walked over and kissed Jane on the top of the head, as I always do when she's sitting on the sofa, and she barely responded. I was a bit confused at this point and asked her what's wrong. She said that she had a fight with Holly and I need to talk to her ASAP. I was concerned, as they disagree at times, but never to the point where they were not talking to each other. I went to talk to Holly, and she was upset because Jane had told her she could not go over to her grandparents' house. They live just down the street, so it's not far. I asked why she had said that, and Holly said that she's not allowed to go because she had not done her chores well enough. I sighed and asked whether Holly thought that she had done her chores well enough, and she just shrugged. It turned out to be a fight over the dishes. Holly had not unloaded the dishwasher, which is one of the jobs that she has to do for allowance. Holly had been too excited to start her new book and had forgotten, and I smiled and ruffled her little hair and said it's fine, but she should go and empty it now. She should apologize to Jane, and then she could go see her grandparents. Holly grumbled, but she slunk off to do it to the kitchen and doing her chores, and then sent a said sorry, somewhat reluctantly, to Jane before running off down the street to my parents' house. Jane was annoyed that I've given in to her, but I argued that I had not because I made her do the chores before she left. Jane said that Holly does not respect her and ignores them when she asks her to do anything, and I promised to have another talk with Holly about that, as Jane lives here now. That was the first time that they've ever clashed heads, and over the last few weeks, it's the occurrence of, more Holly seems to be determined not to do anything Jane asks of her to do. If I'm not home, Holly is making every excuse she can think of to go to spend time with her grandmother. Jane said she barely sees her when I'm not home, and when she does, Holly's moody around her. I think it's getting to Jane. Jane and I both work long hours at times, and we're tired, so I do think that at times Jane overreacts to things that I would not even think about, but I'm more used to being a parent than she is. So here is the question, guys. Should I be worried about the relationship between my girlfriend and my daughter? Is Holly acting out because she's jealous of Jane and resents her for taking part of her life? What do I do? I want to make sure that we can live as happy family unit. I love them both. I'm planning to propose to Jane when we go on a trip in a few weeks, and I would feel better if I knew that Holly was not going to react in a bad way about the whole thing. Update number 1. I've read a lot of the replies, and there were a lot. I'm not sure that I'm any wiser, really. Things seem settled at the moment, and we have had some good times together. I've tried making time for both the girls in my life separately and together, and we have gone on some family trips with my parents on a couple of occasions, and those went well. Somebody mentioned that Holly's getting older and her hormones might be kicking in, and that made my blood run cold. I've not even thought about the fact that it was only a couple of more years until Holly was a teenager, and I would have to deal with all the things that came along with that. I want to make sure that any underlying issues between Holly and Jane are settled before that happens. Geez. I have friends at work with teenage children, and the way they talk, you would think that their darling kids have turned into raging demons overnight. I mentioned that to my mom, and she just laughed and told me to prepare myself for mood swings, first loves, first heartbrokens, and endless friendship drama of teenage girls. It did not exactly make me feel better. Anyways, I think that I'm seeing is just normal everyday family issues, especially for a blended family. Jane has been a part of our life for 2 years, and as somebody who pointed out, I did not mention anything that did not seem like normal issues between kids and parents. I've decided that I'll be going ahead with the proposal when we go on our trip. I plan to talk to Holly about it first, as if not something I want to spring on her and make it look like I did not want to tell her. Holly and I are going out for lunch today, and so I'll see how it goes. I realized in hindsight that I maybe should have written this later in the day once I've spoken to Holly, but I'll just add what happens when we go back and post this as an update. Jane is away at the moment with work, so Holly and I have the house to ourselves for 2 days. I'm taking the time to do something that Holly loves. I managed to get the 2 days off work, benefits of working for your parents, and Holly and I are going to have lunch, go shopping for books, and just do anything that she wants, really. I'll break here, and I'll be back in a few hours. 6 hours later. Hey guys, things went well today for the most part. Let me update you. Holly and I went for lunch at a restaurant we love in our next town over, which is more of a beach town. There's a restaurant that we've been going to for years, which overlooks the bay, and we like to sit outside and watch life happen. When Holly was little, we would make up stories about the things that we could see in the sky, where the boats were going, where we would pretend that there were pirates or adventurers looking for treasure. It's a favorite memory of mine to this day. Today we talked about a music event that she would like to be taking part in, and Holly mentioned that her violin teacher had said that Holly would benefit from a better quality violin. I have to admit, hers is a cheap one I got when I was not sure that she would stick with it, so I agreed with her, and we looked up shops in the area where we could go after lunch. I was having such a good time, and I did feel that there was an appropriate time over lunch to tell Holly about the engagement. After lunch, we went to look at violins, and you'd be surprised how long it takes to pick the perfect violin. Luckily, the owner was an experienced musician because I had no idea what the heck I was looking at. Also, be warned, if you have a musical child, instruments are expensive. Luckily for me, money is not really an issue here, but it made me realize how lucky I am to be able to provide these things for Holly. We loaded up the car, and before we set off, I took a deep breath and told Holly that I planned to propose to Jane. Holly did not say anything for what felt like an age, and finally she asked, would I have to call her Mom? Well, I was surprised that was the only question that she had on her mind, whether she had to call her Mom or not. Holly shook her head firmly and said she didn't want to, and she wanted to call her Jane. I said that's a reasonable request and it'd be perfectly all right. Holly just shrugged and said, I guess it's okay then. I mean, I'm 10. What do I know about marrying people? Huh. I was not sure what they meant by that, but as she seemed okay with it, I did not push the issue. The conversation fell back to her new violin that she was excited to show her teacher, and what we were having for dinner. We got home, ordered some pizza, and cuddled up to the sofa to watch a movie. After all my worrying, life is back on track. Update number 2. At this point, I'm reading the last line of my last update over and over and over, wondering how things went so bad so fast. When Jane got back from her work trip, she was tired because it involved a lot of traveling, and when she saw that Holly was practicing on her new violin, she snapped at me that I was spoiling her. Luckily, Holly did not hear, and I put it down to Jane being tired and just let it go. Our trip was coming up, and it would be a good chance for both Jane and me to relax and spend quality time together. Holly would be spending the week with my parents, which she was looking forward to. I'd noticed that she was spending more time with my parents recently, but I've been working a lot and it made sense rather than be at home of her own. The night before the trip, we all went to our meal and things were really chill, and we laughed and had a good time. So, I dropped off Holly at my parents' and she seemed distant, but I just assumed that she was tired and that we had a late night. I mean, it was the school holidays, so she'll be able to recover and chill in this week. Jane and I flew out for our vacation. The engagement ring hid it in my luggage. I was excited and nervous about the proposal, and I did not want to rush it. So I just let us settle into the routine of a holiday for a few days. Jane made a few comments about how nice it was to be alone with me and have no burden hanging over us, which was a weird thing to say, and because I'm an idiot, I let myself believe she meant work. 2 days into our trip, I asked Jane to come for a walk with me on the beach in the moonlight, and I thought that would be really romantic and a good place for a proposal. So, we walked along the water's edge, and when we got to a part of the beach which was quiet, I got down on one knee and presented Jane with the ring that I've chosen, asking her to marry me. I have to be honest, I was hoping for more of a gushing reaction and not the thoughtful look that appeared on Jane's face. I blinked a few times and felt like a complete idiot as I knelt on the damp sand, waiting for her to say something. She finally spoke up and said, I'm not against the idea and would like to get married, but there are some things I would like to discuss first so that I'm not agreeing to a marriage that would not work for me. Well, I wasn't sure how to reply to that. I mean, it was a proposal, not a contract, that needed the fine points hammered out, and when I realized she was not going to take the ring from me, I stood up, hoping nobody had seen us, as it definitely looked like I've been turned down and made a fool of myself. I said I was not sure what she meant, but we could talk about it back at the hotel, if that's what she preferred. She nodded and said that she was sorry that I had caught her off guard, and there has been things that she wanted to talk about with me for a while. I figured it was better to get any issues ironed out now, rather than get engaged and then have things come up. By the time we walked back to the hotel, I had reasoned out in my mind that Jane was actually being the sensible one here, and marriage was a huge commitment, and we needed to be sure that we were both on the same page, right? Well, it turned out that not only were we not on the same page, but we were also not even in the same part of the book. I'm still in shock about what happened and what Jane asked of me. I'll start with the small stuff. The first thing she said was that she did not want to take my surname, and she thought that was an outdated tradition, and she did not want to belong to anyone. I know a lot of people are doing things like this now, so although I was disappointed because it would be nice for us to all have the same name, it wasn't exactly a big deal in the scheme of things, right? Jane's next comment was also fairly reasonable. She wanted to make sure I did not expect her to give up her career. She enjoyed her work, and she had spent a lot of time getting the education and experience she needed to work in our field, which is hard to do. It's a very niche field. She also said that she wanted me to get my dad to promote her. Well, she said that she's been in her position for a very long time, and she felt that she should be higher in the company, especially if she was going to marry me and become my dad's daughter-in-law. I was not sure that I could promise that, but I did say I would talk to my dad about how we could make that happen. Although, I'm high up in the company. My dad has the final say in anything business related. Jane seemed to be okay with that. Then she dropped the bombshell, which made all the other demands mute. She said that she would not marry me while I continued to pretend that Holly was my daughter and not just some kid that I picked up along the way. She said that she would need Holly to be rehomed before she would agree to the engagement. Yeah, you read that right. She said rehomed, as though Holly was a pet that was in the way. As I was trying to get over the shock and form a reply, she carried on talking. She said that she had been patient while I played dad and spoiled the girl. She didn't even use her name, but really I was being unreasonable. She had lived in the house for a year and the girl was still there like she belonged. Jane said that she wanted to have children after we got married and she did not want our real children to be raised in the same house as an imposter. Yeah, she called my daughter an imposter. Jane finally finished and shrugged, saying, "Those are my conditions and they're not unreasonable, so if you're okay with them, I accept the ring." I can't type what I'm actually thinking and what I actually said, as it would be getting my post banned. But needless to say, I shoved the ring back into the luggage and told her that there's no way in hell that I was marrying somebody who talked about my daughter like that. We get into this huge argument about Holly and Jane saying things that should have never been said about anyone, let alone a 10-year-old child. I could not stay in the room with her any longer, and I told her I was going home. She said I was acting like an unreasonable jerk, and we're on vacation. I did what only could be described as rage packing, as I shoved my clothes into my bag and called the airport looking for the next flight out. Jane was yelling at me about spoiling her vacation, so I told her she's welcome to stay as the room was paid for, but she would be staying on her own. She decided to stay, and I got on the next flight trying to understand how I missed the monster living in the nature of a woman I fell in love with. I wish I could say I was too manly to cry, but I can't. I sat on the plane with tears running down my face and getting strange looks from those around me, but all I cared about was getting home to my daughter and working out what to do next. Am I a failure as her father? How did I miss this? Update number 3, final update of the story. Have things calmed down? Not really. Things have changed absolutely, and when I left the hotel I did not think to tell my parents or Holly that I was coming home, and to say that they were surprised to see me would be an absolute understatement. My mom and dad asked what's wrong, and I just shook my head, saying that we would talk later. In front of Holly I just said that Jane and I had a disagreement, and so I thought it was best that I come home. Holly just looked at me and said, "Good." That was when my mom shook her head, and I suspected I was about to learn even more things about later. Once Holly was settled in bed, I explained to my parents why I had come home. They didn't seem to be too shocked. My dad said that over the last few days, Holly had opened up to them and had been really upset, and the thought that I was about to propose to somebody who made her life really hard. I was shocked, as I knew there were issues between Jane and Holly, but I was not expecting anything like I was about to hear. I was devastated that Holly had not thought that she could talk to me, but my mom said Holly was scared of what would happen. You see, Jane had not only told me that Holly was unwanted in her life, she had also told Holly. For months, Holly has been subjected to Jane telling her she did not belong with me, as she was not my real daughter. When I was not home, Jane punished Holly for every little thing that happened, and if there was nothing that she would use, she just made something up. Holly told my parents that Jane had ripped the pages out of her favorite book, which Holly told me that she's lost. She had called Holly names and said that she was fat and ugly and no wonder nobody wanted her. For months, Holly kept secrets from me and my parents, and it only came to surface when Holly could not bear the thought of Jane being my wife. Jane had told Holly that as soon as she married me, Holly would be thrown out on the streets or would be put into a children's home with the bad kids. Holly had been living in fear. I cried that night. In anger and frustration that my little girl was living in fear, that I would ever throw her out. That would never happen. In the morning, I sat Holly down and told her that no matter what happened, she would be my daughter for the rest of her life, and I loved her more than anything. Holly gets upset at this point and cried that she just wanted to tell me, but she was scared of Jane. I reassured her that Jane would never hurt her again and that she would be gone from our lives forever. While Jane was still on said vacation, I packed up all her crap, and it was waiting in the garage for her when she returned, and she screamed and shouted and blamed Holly for everything. I told her she could leave the boxes in the garage until she found somewhere to live, but they had to go. For Jane, things only got worse, and she not just have been insulted by her daughter, but she had been insulted the granddaughter of her boss. My dad takes no prisoners, and Jane was fired on the spot. Somehow word got around about what she did, and her name was blacklisted amongst our competitors and our clients. As I said, this is a very niche field, and word spreads fast, so for Jane, her cruel and bitter personality cost her everything. Holly and I are healing, and we're going on a vacation soon. I guess I would like to say that be careful who you bring into your children's lives, because you never know when you're bringing in a wolf in sheep's clothing.